Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Lance McHan Show. This is a new venue, so welcome. My guest today is Stephanie, Deborah, and Kendra. We're talking about Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I always want to say week, sorry.
We have an entire month.
We have an entire month and teal ribbons. So, Stephanie, thank you for coming. Deborah, thank you. And Kendra, thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
So, for the people who don't know about what your organization is about, kind of give them a synopsis of what it is.
Yeah, so in 2011, my mom, Deborah, and I founded the Saving Stephanie organization, and that was truly an organization dedicated to simply raising awareness of sexual assault and the prevention of such crimes. It started when I was just 15 years old, so I was really young, and I didn't quite understand all that I was starting or getting myself into, so to speak. But
so you didn't know how big it was going to be when you started?
No. There was really, for me, one mission in mind, and that was to take my experiences as a victim turned survivor and share a message of hope and healing. And if that meant we brought some awareness to sexual assault and sexual trauma, then that was great, and we did that. If it meant that we prevented such instances from occurring through education, that was great. I think we managed to do that as well. But we really sought to open up a dialogue that was unlike a lot of others because I was so young, and because there were so many misconceptions and so much that I was still learning. So it was a learning process for me too. So that's why I say I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into, but I developed just such a deep passion for it that I don't think that I intended to, but I'm very glad that I did.
It's always passionate when you get to help people, especially after you've been through the trauma of the molestation or rape.
Exactly. Yeah. So for us, naming the organization Saving Stephanie, it kind of spoke to that mission. And the initial goal was to find something that I could dive deep into with my mom to heal from my own trauma from sexual assault. I was raped at the age of 13. So 2 years later is when we started really taking action and, heightening our advocacy efforts. But for the most part, it was about helping other people like me. So saving myself, but hopefully saving other people in the process.
When I was going to Delta College, I met this young lady in the tutor lab, and her actual biological father had molested her. And I was like, man, how do you overcome that? And she's like, well, my grandma said either it's going to define me or I'm going to define it, and I choose to define it. And so I kind of think that kind of speaks to what you and your mom set out to do. Yeah,
it's a good outlook to have. Last night I was speaking to a group of women about sexual assault, just kind of as this umbrella term, and the trauma that is endured when sexual assault or sexual abuse occurs. And so one of the things that we were talking about is the reason that sexual assault happens, I guess, so to speak. And sexual assault or sexual violence is really about two things and two things only: power and control.
Right.
And the perpetrator or the abuser's desire to feel that, to feel powerful and to feel in control. And so they use sexual violence to essentially hone in on that desire or that need. And just like your friend, you can let it define you or you can define it. And that really speaks to this concept of taking your power and control back as a victim and as a survivor. And it's the most empowering thing you can do.
Nice. Deborah's got
All
something
right.
to say.
I just want to say that for me, I too am a survivor. I'm an incest survivor. I was sexually abused by a family member from the time that I was 8 till the time I was 16. And I had no voice, and I did not share my story. And I lived in shame and secrecy and fear for many, many years. And I didn't address my trauma. And for me, when it did finally come out, my family told me, we will never talk about this again. This is embarrassment to our family. You will be quiet. We will literally never talk about this again. And I got pregnant by my perpetrator, and my parents helped me to terminate the pregnancy and then said, you will never speak about this again. And I kept my word. We never spoke about it again. And I got a phone call that no mother ever wants to get, that my daughter had been raped. And I know we use the word sexual assault as an umbrella term.
Right.
I think that we are minimizing a lot of times. I use words rape. My daughter was raped. My daughter was sodomized. My daughter was whatever it was. I was raped. I was sodomized. We need to use the words so that people understand sexual assault is an umbrella term. And we all use it because it's a feel good. Nobody likes to say rape.
Right.
Nobody likes to say sodomy. Nobody likes to say oral copulation. You know, it makes it an uglier term. For me, I'm a rape survivor. I was raped at 8. My daughter was raped at 13. And I was not given the support and the help that I needed. And so I ended up whirlwinding and spiraling in trauma and just getting sick, and ended up using substances, getting myself into high-risk situations where I continued to be violated. I continued to be abused by other people.
So when you say high-risk situation, I mean, that's an umbrella term as well.
It is, and I'll clarify them.
Okay.
I continued because, as Stephanie said, and I think so eloquently said, my perpetrator needed 2 things, power and control. And I had no way to take my power and control back. So I then believed that my body did not belong to me. My emotions did not belong to me. I did not have power over my own decisions. So I continued to get into relationships where my power and control were taken again from me, and I gave them.
I see.
Because
I
I ended up in domestic.
Like
no, I ended up in more domestic violence. I ended up allowing men to sexually abuse me again and continue to stay silent. I continued to allow those types of behaviors.
Inside of a relationship?
Inside of relationships, outside of relationships, in bars. If somebody touched me inappropriately, I didn't say stop or set boundaries. My body didn't belong to me.
I got you.
I didn't have control or power over it. And I didn't have people that spoke about it. I didn't have a voice. And so when I watched my daughter suffering, this little bright girl that I used to watch, and she was the only joy I had, to be honest, running through a playground, who was all of a sudden curled up in balls in the closet crying and was failing at school and didn't want to live and didn't want to breathe and didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't recognize my own child anymore. And in that moment, I realized I had to do something to help her heal. And at the same time, and this has become a beautiful journey for us, because I
Healed
used
together.
her little voice became my little voice, and then our voice together became this big voice where we're not scared anymore. We were raped.
You definitely are.
We were raped, and we don't like it.
Yes.
It's not okay. And we believe survivors, and we will advocate for them till the end of the earth. But I, as a mother, needed to do something to help my daughter, unlike what had happened to me. And so I bought teal ribbons.
So how did you come up with
I Google searched.
Okay.
I used Google. Okay. Nobody had
Everybody
taught
loves
me.
Google.
Nobody had taught me in 2011, even so 8 years ago. Nobody had taught me what to do to get help or how to work through it. And so I did Google search. How do you help rape victims?
Mm-hmm.
And this beautiful website popped up about different sexual assault awareness activities, and one of them was called the Teal Ribbon Project.
Okay.
And so I came to Stephanie and I said, we need to tie teal ribbons on every single police car so that it's a symbol to other survivors that they're not alone.
Right.
And we partnered at 15 with them, and we did it. And she went public with her story, and the outpouring was amazing. A matter of fact, Elizabeth Smart, who is the young lady that was kidnapped in Utah, we actually have had open dialogue with her, and we became very close to her. I reached out to her. So we've worked with different organizations and advocacy groups throughout. So it's been an amazing journey, and we continue to support survivors. So, and we will, but it's our own healing journey as well.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. So Kendra,
Hi.
you have a very unique situation.
I do. But I just want to kind of start out with my situation. I have many situations that have happened in my life like that. But because I was born into such dysfunction, it was all swept under the rug. Like nobody ever knew how to deal with it. So I went my whole life carrying this baggage. And one of my core beliefs, because it started when I was so young, it was by a female. And I didn't have my parents. My parents were...
So a female molested you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's very unique.
Yeah. I was young and I was very impressionable because I didn't have a supportive family. So this female, she portrayed herself to be my mom, you know,
Okay.
and we played house, and she did things to me. And then when I got a little bit older and she started doing more things to me, it hurt me. And when I came forward about it, my family didn't believe me because it was, well, she wanted me to do that, you know. So it was swept under.
So you're saying the lady who molested you told your parents that you wanted her
Not my
to,
parents. My parents weren't in my life. My aunt,
your
who
aunt,
raised me, yeah.
You wanted her to
hurt
you.
Yeah. It didn't always start out as hurt. Like in the beginning, it was like we were playing house, you know.
Okay.
And then later on, as it went on for 3 or 4 years, she started hurting me. And then it wasn't right. And when I came forward and finally said, you know, she's hurting me and I don't like it, the situation was confronted, and it was... well, she never told me no. She wanted me to do that stuff to her. So then I was a liar.
Oh, wow.
And well, how come you didn't tell us about it before? And then it was, you know, so that my core
So
beliefs.
the blame all shifted to you at that point. And
Yeah,
you're like,
at 9 years old. Yeah.
How is it my fault?
Yeah.
How old were you?
9.
9.
Yeah. So
How could a 9-year-old even have an idea what the world looks like at that age?
like I said, I came from a long line of dysfunction. So I didn't, everything of what was normal to me was bad. You know,
I see.
I was never taught anything.
So
good.
you had no barometer
Perception.
of what was good or what was
Right.
bad.
Right. And this family that I spent a lot of time with, that took me to church and all that kind of stuff, like I wanted what they had. So I let it go on for a long time.
I see.
You know, went to church and spent a lot of nights over there, and I tried to be part of that family because I never had that. So I allowed it to go on for a long time. And then go ahead.
So where are you at now? And the only word, I may be wrong, is recovery in the process. Where can you kind of...
So today I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor.
Okay.
And
Empowering.
right. And I will tell a little bit like Deborah did. I started using substances at 11 years old. Very hard substances. And I'll put it out there, I started using meth at 11 years old.
Wow.
Because I dealt with a lot of, well, I never dealt with, I was never allowed to deal with stuff that I went through. And I also grew up not allowing my body to be my own, not having a voice for what happened to me. And I put myself and my body, my children, through a lot of things that we should have never went through, because one of my core beliefs growing up was that I wasn't worth being wanted. You know, nobody wanted me because I never had a steady foundation. People that I thought loved me came and went, and I never knew how to fight for myself until one day my children were taken from me, and I didn't have a chance but to stand up for fight for myself. So I took my power back.
How long ago was that?
It started 3 years ago, and I'm 36.
Wow.
You know, but I choose not to let people do that to me anymore. I choose to surround myself with healthy people.
So how did you meet Deborah and Stephanie?
I had completed a substance abuse program fighting for my children, and I moved into the residence that they run.
Okay.
And I've been there for over a year, and I have grown so much, and I have such an amazing support system. And today I know that no matter what I go through or no matter what happens, and that's why I choose to speak about this stuff, because I won't give anybody else my power. They've taught me how to take my power back.
Well, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
Your situation is very unique, and it's probably not the only one. So just by being able to speak about it, maybe who knows how many people you can help.
I
That's
hope
amazing.
so.
I
Thank
think,
you for having
like
me.
in Kendra's situation, my mom's situation, even my own situation, you know, when we say that one person's situation is unique, I think we should discuss the fact that it's really not all that unique.
Well, I mean,
it's just not as broadcasted as
so you think
like
there's a
male
lot
on
of
female violence or man on woman.
So you think there's a lot of female on female violence?
There is.
Well, do you have a statistic?
I can say statistically, not off the top of my head, but after we had started the Saving Stephanie organization, I worked at the Women's Resource Center at University of the Pacific as a student-to-student peer educator. So I did a lot of campus and community outreach, awareness and prevention presentations. And then after I graduated, I moved to Southern California, and I had the privilege of getting my certification as a rape crisis advocate. And so I was, so to speak, kind of on like a first responder team when someone
So when the call came in, you were
disclosed a sexual assault. So in my experience, in hearing so many other people come forward and disclose abuse, it happens much more often than we think.
Oh, wow.
And so
That's crazy.
I think the misconception too, and perhaps why it seems more unique in Kendra's situation, and I won't say that it's not like as prevalent, it's probably not as prevalent as male on female violence, for instance, right? Like we hear that story and that dialogue so often because it happens all the time. But what we don't hear is those types of stories. We don't hear a lot of people come forward, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's 1 in a million. It just means that it doesn't really get the same type of attention that it deserves. But I do know in my experience, I've had people disclose, like in Kendra's situation, that it was a woman or a female friend, family member, stranger that assaulted them, that shares the same gender identity or sex as them. I've had men come forward and say they were sexually assaulted by a female or a woman.
Speaking of that, because it's all over the news lately.
But I've had men
say
that they were sexually assaulted by men.
Yeah.
I've had.
I mean that because that's the more common one. That's the man on man.
Right.
The whole teacher, all the teachers that are having sexual relations with all these young men, you would never hear about that before, and it probably happened.
Right.
So that's a.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these stories, thankfully, are getting brought to our attention, which is great when it comes to an awareness aspect.
Do you think it desensitizes the public, though, to some degree?
To hear it so often?
Yeah.
You mean? It's difficult to say. I think it depends on the person. For a lot of people, for instance, I just had this conversation last week with someone who was talking about growing up in Stockton, being born and raised here, with the violence and the crime and the gangs and the drugs and, the exposure that people who are Stockton residents kind of specifically get more so than maybe residents of other cities. And the fact that, when they see, another person shot, another person killed, another person victim to abuse or violence, that they had felt like they hear it so often, Stockton, that they don't really bat an eye anymore. So I think in some cases, it depends on the person. Some people may become desensitized. Some people may suppress the sensitivity because it's too difficult to deal with. But I think for a lot of people, for most people, it's a true benefit to consistently hear these types of stories because it gives voice to people. It gives voice to people who have perhaps unique situations, and even people who have, let's say, a more perceived typical sexual assault scenario, that story is still valid and valuable in the overall discussion. So I think it's important for us to not become desensitized and to recognize that just because it's happening so often
doesn't make it.
We need to actually hone in on that more and start paying attention
Right.
and start being more sensitive to the discussions. Because I think that's the issue. It's not necessarily a desensitization. It's that people are ignoring it because it's too hard to talk about.
Good point.
I think I want to add to that and say, for me, with the Saving Stephanie organization, and as a survivor of sexual abuse, maybe it's possible that because it's heard so much, that there is a it's being in our social minds or in the media. It's such a big thing, but to survivors,
It's empowerment.
it is never an issue that we're desensitized to.
Right.
We are on point. We are advocating. When somebody comes to us, male, female, regardless of who their perpetrator was, no matter who they are as a survivor, when they come to us and they say, that happened to me too, we are never desensitized. And so if people are being desensitized, you won't be when it's your family member, or
Right.
when it's your child, or when it's your best friend, or when it's your wife, or when it's your son. You won't be. And if we look at statistics, which aren't even accurate because it's the most underreported crime, how many children do you have, Lance?
2.
You have 2. How many children do you have, Stephanie? 3, 5, right? How many children do I have? 5. How many children do you have, Kendra?
5.
We have 15 children between those of us at this table. Statistically, each one of us is going to have a son or daughter that's going to be sexually assaulted based on our current statistics, and those are the underreported ones.
Wow, that's crazy.
So if you think about it that way,
it's mind blowing.
it's mind-blowing, and nobody should be desensitized, because when it's your child or your mother or your wife or your son or your husband that's in that situation, you have to step up and teach them and help them and support them and help them work through that trauma. Because one of the things that I know for a fact, for my own personal experience, I am still triggered today by things. I was molested and raped on a 10-acre ranch in Loomis, California, in different barns with old cars, and I can't smell hay to this day.
Wow.
Without being triggered. I was raped at 8 in a barnyard. I'm 46. The smell of hay makes me want to vomit still to this day. My family knows, and so when we're around hay, they're like, "Hey, Mom, let's not go in the hay barrels by the pumpkin patch," right?
You're driving down the freeway and there's a hay truck in front of
So
you.
you're not.
It's like,
so maybe.
what do you do? Like, seriously, what do you do when there's a diesel rig and you're either it's full of hay in the summertime?
It depends on how triggered I get. I have gotten, thank God, I have gotten the support and the services that I need, so that I know how to use coping skills and mindfulness skills and those kinds of things to de-escalate myself. But I also, and most importantly, I reached out to other survivors. I reach out to my family that are not survivors and say, like, this is what happened and I need support right now, so we need to pull over and I need to get some water. And everybody around me knows. So even if we are as a society getting desensitized because we hear about it too much, statistically, somebody in your family or somebody you know is going to be victimized. And so you're going to have to step up so that they don't end up using substances as a leaven. They don't end up stuck in darkness and with no voice. Because I'll tell you what, when you are a survivor, you are never desensitized.
Makes
Ever.
total sense too.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So of my 5 children, you brought that up. One of my children have been sexually assaulted, my son, and that was one of my biggest fears in life. Was to have something happen to one of my children and not know what to do. So my child was sexually assaulted by a family member, and my first thought was, I'm calling the police, you know?
Let's stab him.
Well,
I thought that.
I know you did.
that's the thing is growing up in a family that was so dysfunctional and having nothing but violence. Like, I knew that was a possibility, but I've always wanted to be there for my children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my biggest fear in life is to be taken away from my children and not knowing or not being able to be there when something bad happens, you know? So, that's my biggest fear.
That was your big why.
Right. My biggest thing is I have always taught my children that if something happens, you know, you can come to me for anything. And I have a really good relationship with my children like that. My children tell me everything.
That's important.
Very, very important. And I have always wanted to make it clear. And I am a big supporter of helping people too. And that's what I want to be when I grow up is somebody that helps somebody too, you know?
Well, it sounds like you're on your way.
I'm
based
trying.
on the conversation prior to the...
Thank you. But that's the thing is I never want to make anybody feel like what they feel important about or what they feel less important about, or that their trauma or their abuse doesn't matter, you know, because growing up, one of my core issues on my beliefs was that I wasn't important enough to matter. And it's not fair for people that come from situations like that, that have to go through that, to feel like they don't matter in life. So my child was able to come to me and go, and by the grace of God, nothing bad ever happened. Like no penetration or anything like that, because he knew, you know, mom has always told them that if anything ever, nobody touches you but mom, you know? Yeah. And so when that happened, my son came to me and it was dealt with. But again, the biggest fear in life is for something like that to happen to one of my children and not know how to handle it. So, yeah, if anybody gets anything from this, it's that no matter how big or small, you matter.
Absolutely.
You know, no matter what.
So where is Saving Stephanie at now?
It's definitely in the works to be reconfigured and rebooted. You know, I went to college and then moved away, and so things got placed kind of on the back burner as I was, you know, working with another rape crisis center out of the area. My husband was in the military, and you know, life sometimes gets in the way,
Absolutely.
Unfortunately. And that doesn't mean I was any less of an advocate, but now that I'm back home in Stockton, I have more time to devote specifically to our city and our county. So that's something I'm excited about.
Super. You have any plans? Like, where are you at? Like,
so for the remainder of
temporarily?
April, you know, we're doing a lot of brainstorming and figuring out how to map out our next plans.
Okay.
We would like to, you know, we're already almost to the middle of the month. We've been spending a lot of time having more personal dialogues with smaller groups and smaller, you know, support groups. But, you know, eventually we want to be able to get back out into the public eye and really bring more awareness.
Do you have a Facebook page?
We do, yeah.
I mean,
Saving Stephanie on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're starting to get a bit more active on there as well. Yeah, we're just trying to get back out there. And I think we have more to offer now with, you know, my own education and my own experiences, but
and your mom, education,
yeah, now in law school.
If you haven't noticed, she's quite the pit bull.
So we definitely
I love her.
Yeah, so we're definitely, I think, in a new headspace, but at a greater capacity to serve and a greater capacity to advocate more efficiently for people and more comprehensively for the community. So it's looking good. We're excited.
The good thing about the Facebook group is people could connect and kind of start the dialogue, and then you could kind of, you know, they could give, it's kind of like a virtual meeting where people could share their stories, and then if you're monitoring, you could like, you need to come in and see me, or it's just a way for digital age.
Yeah, we do actually have a current phone number on Facebook at the Saving Stephanie organization that anybody can reach us. If they just want to talk, they can private message us through Facebook and be anonymous and share their stories if they want to. If that's the only way that you can share your voice today, we encourage you to do it just in writing. If you're sharing your voice in a journal, it doesn't matter, just start the dialogue. And one thing I really...
So you're saying that they can message you,
Yes.
and then you'll post it as you.
No, we won't post it at all. We'll read it and we'll respond privately.
But what I'm saying is, if they want to share their story, but they don't want to be known,
We will.
they could share it and you could post it
Yes.
just so it's an outlet.
Yes.
I got
And we do a lot of public speaking events. A matter of fact, the Saving Stephanie organization, we always knew in 2011 that we were going to grow and venture out to help survivors. I've worked in substance abuse for a long time, but we also know that about 90% of the women that we serve that have substance use issues or they're involved in criminal court systems or any of those things have sexual abuse or violence and trauma. And that has led to their other behaviors that are, again, stigmatized. And if we deal with the trauma and we start those conversations, then they begin to heal and those behaviors go away and they get to engage again in our community in a healthy and more productive way. It changes the entire conversation. So we do have a clothing closet for survivors. We work with women, we work with men, we work with anybody. We do not discriminate. Stephanie also, I'm really impressed with this too. She's taught me more than I've ever taught her as a mother. She minored in gender studies at UOP, and she's a huge advocate for that community. And we help all survivors. We help all people that need help. We have a clothing closet. We have counseling services. We have referrals. We have education. If somebody needs help teaching their children how to start the conversation, we have those services available so that parents that want to teach their children safe space things are, and how to advocate and teach and talk about those things. We have those services available, and we will help just about any person that wants help with that healing and trauma. And I just want to say one thing that that again, I keep going back to this, are we as a society talking about this too much? Nobody talked to me about it. And until Stephanie and I shared our stories, my mother came forward and admitted that she was an incest survivor. My mom had kept that quiet until she was 50 years old. So my mother didn't have the emotional skills to help me. And I didn't have the emotional skills to help Stephanie. I had to learn them. One thing that I can say confidently is that Stephanie's son right now is 2 years old, and he can tell you every single thing about consent, about his penis, about his scrotum, about his genitalia. He can tell you it's not okay. He can tell you it is. My daughter's 11 years old, and she's been taught this now because we've made it a normal part of conversation. Right. So I actually was at school the other day, and somebody was congratulating me and asked me for permission to hug me. And my daughter said, "Mom, that's consent, huh?" And I said, "Yes, it is. Good job." And she's 11. So for the fact that we're starting to have these conversations, we are teaching a new generation of children
right.
what that looks like and what's appropriate and what a boundary is. And I think for me, that's really empowering. And I am going to also say that because of this journey, we also now help women that are with trauma, with housing, with clothing, with any of those things. So if you're in need, if you just need to talk, we're here. But this journey took me out of counseling and out of mental health and out of substance abuse treatment into law school, because I planned to be a huge advocate and make sure that survivors are heard. People that are just because the law is there doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's fair all the time. But I plan to continue my advocacy work in a bigger forum and change laws and change societal and advocate for these people. Like, it's not okay.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. You want to give that website again or a Facebook page?
Facebook, if you just search Saving Stephanie. One of the things I'd also like to add, if we have some time, is that in addition to all the things my mom said and the services that I can provide as an advocate and my mom can provide as an advocate and other survivors can provide just by sharing their stories and beginning the healing process for themselves, there's still such a great conversation that's lacking, and that's something that I think needs to be had. Like, I mean, let's point out the obvious, like, we're a bunch of white people sitting around a table. Like, I don't have experience with the fact that sexual assault happens disproportionately to other communities of people. Like, I can't hone in on that conversation. Like,
Right.
I know statistics, I know research and, analytical data about how often it happens, and that there's a heightened risk for sexual assault and sexual violence against specific populations of people, but I don't have that experience to share.
Right.
And so it would be a really great opportunity for members of the community, from marginalized communities, people of color, members of the LGBTQIA plus community, to come forward and share their experiences, because they're never really talked about. And when they are, the stigmas are oftentimes much more heightened. And so it would be a unique conversation to have, and one that I think would add a lot of value. And so I know for myself as an advocate, that's one of the things that I've strived to do, is to give people more of a space to share and to kind of step back and sharing my own experience, because I've done that a lot, and I'm happy
Right.
to share it with anyone who
Yeah,
needs
it's always
to know.
good to empower other people.
But to have a floor for people to come forward and to feel safe and supported.
That's why I think that Facebook page is important.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
people
no,
could-
exactly.
could
So-
connect with other people, and then they can empower each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have anything you would like to add before we tune out?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you
it's
for
very-
having us.
very-
Look for our Teal ribbons on the police cars.
All right. It's a very difficult conversation. So if anybody needs help or looking for a voice, Saving Stephanie on Facebook is a way to connect. You can private message, post your questions, comments, and the ladies will get back with you.
And if it's something we can't help with, we know the resources that can.
Oh,
so.
yes, definitely. They're connected in the community. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I will see you next week. Have a great day, everybody.